Hello, and welcome to our presentation on ancient Singaporean history. I am Waiter, and joined with me are Alvin, Lin, Shun Kang, and Kai. We will be discussing important archaeological findings of ancient Singaporean history. So here is a list of things and artifacts that we will cover, and without further ado, let's go!
At the Singapore River's north bank, a thriving ancient port settlement, Temasek, used to exist from the late 13th century for slightly more than a century. The earliest record of Temasek appeared on Chinese merchant traveller Huang Dayu's 岛夷之略 as a place named Banzu, in which Wang briefly described a settlement around a series of elevating hill slopes, believed to refer to the current-day Fort Canning Hill. Other historical records like Sejarah Melayu, a chronicle text of the Straits of Malacca region, and colonial documents similarly corroborate the presence of a settlement around the area in a parallel description of the area's physical layout. Nevertheless, such records are restricted to mere descriptions of the setting and reveal little about the social-political life in this mysterious polity. Historian Derek Hayne laments the severe lack of empirical data that helps to shed light on the significance of this settlement to regional history. Hence, archaeological data becomes paramount in substantiating these limited pieces of evidence to help us reconstruct a fuller narrative, giving us more insight into the character of this classical Malay port settlement in the period. According to Hayne, a distinct feature in Temasek that was common to such settlements is the presence of large quantities of ceramic shards, glass and metalwares, shell and food remains, post-moles, religious architecture, and sculpture. These empirical findings confirmed the bustling trade that was taking place in Temasek and challenged the previous notion of the rurality of the region before 1400. Combined with texts like Sejarah Melayu, this rich archaeological data and findings shed light on the established social structure that has been in place in Temasek, characterizing an urban settlement that existed pre-1400. This settlement is, however, characterized by constant warfare and conflicts. In his record, Wang mentions a fleet from Sian, probably denoting a group from southern Chao Phraya Valley in modern Thailand, making a siege on the settlement. In a separate record, the Sejarah Melayu mentions two attacks on the settlement from the Majapahit Empire, the latter subsuming it as a Javanese vessel. We do not know when Temasek's name was changed to Singapore. This may have happened in the late 14th or early 15th century. And by the late 16th century, fights between the Malay, Chinese, Dutch, and Portuguese filled the waters of the Singapore shores, making Singapore's prehistoric narratives inseparable from the themes of war and conflicts.
Thank you so much for the riveting recap of Singapore's history. Hi, I am Waiter, and I'll be going over how power was consolidated within Singapore and show how the artifacts are able to elucidate information about conflicts and monarchy. Artifacts are able to inform what decisions of individuals in power were thinking and hence accurately inform how people held power, therefore showing the transference of power and the distribution of territories. Two conflicts in context to note. The first is the Battle of Aceh, so the Aceh versus the Portuguese, and the second will be the Annals, which depicted the rise of the monarchy and the traditions within Singapore itself. The artifacts are important for two reasons. The first is that you're able to see the transference of power. Singapore has been called many names, and maps are able to reveal not only who the state was under, but also allows for the inference of power struggle. So if two different maps, like the one in 1570 and the one in 1755, one showing Singapore as a distinct region while the other showing Singapore as a subset of Malacca, shows the power dynamics between Singapore and other locations. Secondly, you're able to portray what was happening both literally and figuratively. There are two mediums of conveying information that I will cover here: stories and recounts, and pictures. At first glance, stories might not be very accurate as far as archaeological findings, but they not only reflect what the people believed in then, but also explains how they lived. Did you know that the stories of the Annals were actually used to prescribe and explain monarchy? Stories of royalty being descended by gods were believed by citizens and royalty alike, and hence were used to justify kings and queens existing. Furthermore, it was also informed of the customs which informed the monarchy. Traditions, rituals, and ceremonies were modeled after the Annals and informed how people behaved. By pictures, one is able to see the conflict between the Portuguese and the Aceh people and the treatment of people after they got captured. This shows not only the transference of power, so from this picture you can probably infer that the Aceh people lost, but even the scale of loss can also be seen. They are without clothes and they are escorted in chains. The portrayal of people through pictures can elucidate a lot of information about the context then. By pictures, one is able to see the conflict between the Portuguese and the Aceh people, and the treatment of people after they got captured. This shows not only the transference of power, so from this picture you can probably infer that the Aceh people lost, but even the scale of loss can also be seen. They are without clothes and they are escorted in chains. The portrayal of people through pictures can elucidate a lot of information about the context then. From here, you can see how artifacts can tell a lot about how power is taken, fought over, and cemented. Artifacts are important fragments of history that inform such an important theme in history. Power. Passing on the time to Chun Kang to tell you more.
I will now discuss how artifacts are also able to convey the lived experiences of those from the past. We will divide this section into two parts, with my portion focusing primarily on luxury goods that were so expensive and precious they were owned only by a select few. In the next section, Lin will take you through how artifacts contribute to our understanding of the layman. When we speak about luxury, it is likely that images of gold and gemstones are evoked in one's mind. However, there were far more exotic items in the past, with the hornbill cast being a popular option to display one's wealth. In the 13th and 14th century, Chinese travelers often sought out for these coveted artifacts from Temasek or Palembang. Wang Dayuan himself even noted the extraordinary quality of the hornbill cast found in Bantu, near present-day Fort Canning Hill. In one such species, the casts were so durable and malleable that they were eventually processed into all manners of adornments and jewelry, such as earplugs, rings, potions, and brooches. Another such example would be the small-mouth jars, otherwise known as xiao kou pings, which were commonly used to store liquids in China. They were largely abundant during the pre-colonial period in Singapore. However, it was what they were filled with when destined for Singapore that made all the difference. They were often filled with an amorphous substance that has built quite a reputation for having mystical properties, such as preserving one's longevity and even performing the alchemical miracle of converting things into pure gold. Does it ring a bell yet? Yep, it's quicksilver. That's what these xiao kou pings were primarily filled with, pure liquid mercury, which was often used to make medicine and purify gold during the pre-colonial periods. It was an important and valuable commodity, and the fact that many of these were discovered in Singapore suggests both its affluence and importance as a trading hub. These jars were so sturdy and convenient that they were eventually repurposed to store lime for chewing with betel nuts. I will now pass my time to Lin, who will share more about how artifacts inform us about the everyday lives of those who lived near the Singapore River during the 14th to 15th century.
Hi, I'm Lynn, here to tell you more on the everyday lives which people in Singapore led during the 14th and 15th century by analysing the artifacts at the Singapore North Bank River. The artifacts I would like to cover include the metal artifacts and solidified residue from metalworking, stoneware, earthenware, as well as the Chinese coins. Firstly, one artifact which I would like to highlight would include the metal artifacts and solidified residue from metalworking from the 14th to 15th centuries. This highlighted how people using metals such as copper and bronze made fishing implements such as fish hooks and wires. Such prominence of metalworking on fishing implements highlighted the day-to-day life of Singaporeans in the 14th century. Secondly, another artifact I would like to highlight would be the stoneware shirts as well as fully intact stoneware. Large portion of stoneware shirts came from storage jars which were used to ship foodstuff and fine ceramics. Original jars, typically round-bodied jars with lugs on the shoulder, or small-mouthed jars which tapered towards the base. Jars were probably reused after their original contents had been depleted. A few shirts bearing many parallel incisions on the interior suggested that they were used in food preparation, such as for grating. Going off the same tangent, another artifact I would like to highlight would be earthenware. Most of the earthenware used in 14th century Singapore was made locally. Most earthenware cooking pots have been found near the Singapore River rather than on Fort Canning Hill. The soot on the shirt of the round-bottomed pot indicates that it was placed over the stove. There were no cooking pots in the past, hence the people in the past used earthenware to replace current-day cooking pots. Another artifact would be greenware, as seen from this celadon bowl. Greenware was the most common colour of Chinese porcelain found in early Singapore. Greenware were imported from varying places, including Fujian and Guangdong. Most Singaporeans in the 14th century would have been able to afford one or two pieces, hence becoming a prominent part of the typical Singaporean household in the 14th century. Lastly, another artifact I would like to highlight would be the coins found at the northern bank of the Singapore River. These coins date back to the Tang and Northern Song dynasties, but were in circulation in Singapore in the 14th to 15th centuries. They were used for payments besides the dominant view of barter trade during the 14th century, while some may have been melted down at metal workshops to make other objects.
When you film? Yeah, we're trying to film for Islamic law.
Hey, a very handsome man, Sir Stafford. Thank you for your service to our country. In conclusion, Singapore is an urbanized city long before Raffles set foot on this island. Singapore was already a trading port. Even if there are not much information about this island, the artifacts found tells us that this island sees trade practiced at our shores. Singapore was already a trading port long before Raffles came to our shores, and this idea of Singapore being a sleepy fishing village should be revised and dropped, as it was not the case from today's presentation. Thank you. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and have a good day.